Good morning, everyone. You are with the second day of Czerny Security Forum 2021. The first day was devoted to data protection, data collection, and data usage, and of course the security aspects of all these processes. My name is Dr. Asya Metodieva. I am a researcher at the Institute of International Relations in Prague. Unfortunately, as you know, we cannot welcome you in Czech Republic this year, but you have the opportunity to be with us online and to attend the discussions with our excellent speakers online in these 2 days. If you have missed something from day one, you can check our website and, of course, engage with the discussions there or post it on social media. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook these days. I am hurried to introduce my speaker in today's panel. Actually, we're going to start with a workshop, day 2, workshop devoted to one of the recent publications of the Institute of International Relations in Prague, and the author of the publication is Dr. Federica Cristini, who is a senior researcher at the Center for International Law. She holds a PhD in international law and degree in law from the University of Verona. She worked as a postdoctoral researcher at the World Trade Institute of the University of Bern, Switzerland, and the University of Verona. Federica has been a visiting scholar in many countries and many universities, and her main research interests include international economic law, the policies of sub-regional groups in Europe, and international law of cybersecurity. With Kristina, we are with the discussant Kristina Irion, who is going to be online. We are going to discuss Federica's paper. Kristina is associate professor at the Institute for Information Law at the University of Amsterdam. She's a director of the annual IVR summer course on privacy law and policy, and the coordinator as well as the lecturer in the Research Masters in Informational Law. She's a non-resident fellow of the Center for Media, Data and Society at Central European University, already in Vienna, as we know. And Kristina's research is on the interpretation and analysis of the transformational processes that reconfigure the legal properties of digital data in line with societal needs. Very interesting discussion is waiting for us. The topic of, I would say, day 2 more generally is political surveillance. We're going to talk a lot about what governments, what public and private actors require from us as users in terms of data, how they use it, how they store it, and whether we know everything about these processes. I would like to start with the title of today's paper, Protecting Privacy and Data While Tracking COVID-19 in Europe. Which cooperation? The focus is on Czech Republic and Italy. Very interesting comparison, and I give you the floor now to maybe tell us more about the paper.
Thank you so much. So good morning, and good morning everyone. Good morning Kristina. Good morning everyone watching today, and thanks so much for the invitation. Thanks to the organizers, and thanks to Asya for putting together this great program. Thanks to the conference unit, Institute of International Relations, for setting up everything so greatly. And I'm very happy to present my paper, and I'm very grateful to Kristina to have agreed to be my discussant. I'm very looking forward to discuss with her and also with you. And for now, I'm just introducing the paper. I would like to give an overview of the topic, what is about, how I structure the paper, and then I highlight on some points that I found it interesting while I was writing, and maybe it would be also interesting to engage with them more also in the discussion. So the topic is about privacy and data protection with regard to contact tracing app. We all know contact tracing app, these mobile apps that we can download, and they are being used by national governments, not only in Europe, but also all over the world, to monitor the spread of the virus. So why is it important to talk about right to privacy and data protection? Well, basically, when we install these apps on our private devices, they can gather data, they can collect data, they can send out data to other mobile devices, to central servers. So it is important to understand which kind of data they are collecting, where these data are sent, and who is controlling, who is processing this data. So these are the main questions that we should question when we talk about right to privacy and data protection. And in the paper, I focus more on Europe, what have been the European initiatives so far, and I focus especially on Italy and the Czech Republic, mainly because they have been among the first countries who have developed and released this kind of apps in Europe. And so in the paper, I overview a little bit of the debate that has pop up with regard to right to privacy and data protection. And in the final part, also give us some recommendation of what EU institutions, national governments can do to engage more in cooperation. And why I'm focusing on cooperation? But I think that cooperation is a key element when we talk about the right to privacy and data protection. With cooperation means also sharing best practices, and sharing best practices also implies being a bit more transparent what governments do with their data, and also to share this practice with other states in order also to create a level playing field and to ensure that tracking apps developed by different countries are developed more or less in the same way, and they guarantee the same level of protection so that citizens, users are not discriminated also because they're using an app in one country rather than using it in another country. So what has happened at the European level? The European Union and the European Commission has tried to develop some initiatives in order to develop common protocols on tracking apps in order to try to have a common tracking app among member states, but this has not been really much successful. Some states have followed it, others not. But the European institutions have been quite active when it comes on the regulatory side, meaning that they have issued a number of documents, especially in the first part of the pandemic, mostly reminding the states of the fact that while developing these mobile devices, they should also be aware of the privacy issues and on data protection. And why I'm saying reminding, because it is true that at the European level, we already have legal instruments that protect the right to privacy and that ensure data protection also in the digital sphere. We have the Charter of Fundamental Rights guaranteeing the right to protect personal data. We have the General Data Protection Regulation regulating ensuring data protection of personal data of natural person. We have, for example, the e-privacy directive, which ensures the protection of data in electronic communications. All instruments that have been issued well before the pandemic. So the European Union is already equipped with the legal instruments. And most of the documents the Commission issued in April 2020 after the pandemic, and while states were developing the tracking apps, these documents reminded the states that, look, you should be aware that there is this legal framework in place. You should be aware that these apps should comply with these main principles. And also these documents includes a sort of checklist of what can be the technical requirements the technical features of apps that can ensure privacy, that can be privacy preserving, and can And we have the European Commission issuing, for example, a recommendation in April, and then also a guidance in the same month. We have also other bodies, European bodies, issuing this kind of guidelines. For example, the eHealth network, which is a platform which was created in 2012 and gathering representatives of EU member states dealing with digital health. Because digital health is something that was already in place before the pandemic. Of course, it gained a new momentum during the pandemic, but this platform was already in place. And it issued this toolbox for member states, which is again a checklist of technical requirements of the apps, saying if we have this kind of technical requirements, we might ensure data protection, we ensure that data are protected. And also the European Data Protection Board, which is an independent body, which was created again by the General Data Protection Regulation, has set again other guidelines on for ensuring data protection when developing a contact tracing app. One of the main key recurrent themes of these documents is the fact that the user should be always in control of his data. One of the main key messages saying that the user, and to be in control of the data that are sent through the app towards to other mobile devices or to central servers. It needs first needs to be adequately informed, meaning that when we are installing an app, we should be adequately informed of which kind of data we are giving, which kind of data the app is gathering, is collecting, is storing, is sending around, and for how long, for which purposes, and who is controlling, who is processing this data. And also among the different debates that arose, and maybe we can also go back to this later in the debate, but I would like to focus on a specific debate that arose on the fact that there was this debate on whether the app should technically ensure privacy and data protection. Was the fact was the choice of using a centralized or decentralized protocol for developing the app, and what does it mean? Let's make an example. For example, decentralized, when you have a content tracing app based on a decentralized protocol, what does it mean? It means that when you are installing the app on your mobile phone, and you activate the app, then the app collects and stores some encrypted codes, and each encrypted codes correspond to the codes which are receiving from other mobile devices my mobile devices is in contact with. So whenever I'm in contact with other mobile devices, under certain circumstances, through the Bluetooth signal, I'm receiving this encrypted code. And there is this list of encrypted codes in my mobile phone. If I happen to be tested positive, for example, a healthcare officer should give me a code, and and this is to my discretion to upload this code in the app. And if I do it, this sends a signal to a central server. And this server, which should normally be monitored and implemented by a public authority, normally is the Ministry of Health of the state, has this list of codes corresponding on the mobile phones of users who have been tested positive. And this list of codes are normally sent to all the mobile phones where the app is installed. So I'm receiving this list, and in the app on my mobile phone makes a comparison of these two lists, the list of the codes which are already stored, because comes from the contact have been made, and the list of the codes that I'm receiving from the central server of the person who has been tested positive. And the app makes this kind of match. And if there is a match, the match is positive, then an alert message pops up in my mobile devices. In a decentralized system, all the data of my contacts, which are encrypted, are kept stored in my mobile devices. In a centralized system, also this list of encrypted codes of contacts are sent to a central server. So this is basically very simply the difference between the two protocols, and European institutions has normally put a preference on the decentralized system, saying if you design the app in this way, the data protection and right to privacy is much more ensured, because there is also less flows of data, there is less data going around, so there are less risks also in terms of data breach and, for example, identity theft and so on. So what has been the take of the states on this? And in the paper, took the two cases of Italy and the Czech Republic, which I found quite interesting. Let's start with Italy. Italy in June 2020 released an app called Immuni app, and which was developed by an Italian company, Binding Spoon, together with the Ministry of Health, and this app, the use and implementation of this app was also regulated by a specific law, which was enacted by the parliament, by the government, and then received by the parliament. And according to this law, ensured that the use of the app should be voluntary, so it's not a mandatory. There's no mandatory use of the app, and according to the law, data gathered should be the app should be developed according to a decentralized system using Bluetooth technology and not a GPS technology. So shouldn't collect location data from the private devices. All data stored also should be treated only for the purpose of the app, which is to monitor the spread of the virus, and should be stored until the end of the pandemic at the latest, which in Italy for now, it's by the end of this, the state of the emergency, it's set by the end of this year. So according to the law, by the end of this year, all data, unless the state of emergency is prolonged, will be deleted. And this law also was approved, followed a positive opinion of the Data Protection Authority. In it, according to Italian regulation, when the Parliament issues a law involving also right to privacy and data protection, should always consult the Data Protection Authority, who should give us its positive opinion before the law is adopted. And the Data Protection Authority was positive towards the app in terms of right to privacy and data protection, but it highlights several shortcomings also, saying it's basically it said in general it's okay, you can go on. It seems that it respects the right to privacy and data protection, but please be aware of a number of things. And among these things were, for example, the use of anonymized data, because all the data that are collected from the app, also from other devices, should be collected in an anonymized way, meaning that when I shouldn't be able to identify the owner of the app I've been in contact with, so I shouldn't be able to re-identify the code and associate it to a specific mobile devices. And Data Protection Authority warned that this also anonymized data can actually be recombined with other data, and actually it is possible to re-identify the person technically. And so Data Protection Authority said, okay, you should be aware, this practice of recombination is called should be prohibited by law. but then the government didn't follow up on that aspect in particular very much. And also, among the other things, also warned against cybersecurity issues, saying you should always carry on a risk assessment for the app too, and this risk assessment should also be public, so everyone should be aware of which kind of risks can incur when using the app or not. And also the Ministry of Health just on this just replied, okay, we will do it, not really now because the debate is really high, so the feedback we will receive will not be very good for the implementation of the app, but then it didn't really follow up also on that. And what about Czech Republic? Also in Czech Republic, in April 2020, it released an app called Rouška, and this app was developed by an informal group of experts. It was not a private company, just an informal group of experts who helped the Ministry of Health in developing this app. And actually it was released in two versions. First one in April 2020 and then a second one in September 2020. And the second version actually was updated in order to make it more compatible also to other apps, in order to also to be put in dialogue with other European apps. And so in this case, the development implementation of the app was based on a resolution of the Czech government, which identified the Ministry of Health as the responsible authority for the implementation of the app. In this case, as also in the Italian case, actually, these apps were not very popular, to say. As also in Italy, the Immuni app has not been downloaded after 1 year only by 10 million person, and in Czech Republic by less than 2 million person. And in Czech Republic in October this year, also Ministry of Health decided to suspend the app because of this low use actually. But when it comes to the data protection, right to privacy assessment, in both versions of the Czech app, the app was put under a review based on privacy issues by this independent experts. So it were also experts from a university, think tank, associations, and the reports of this review are also public. You can check it on the official website of the app, and they basically say that the app comply with the GDPR and with the national legislation according to related to right to privacy and data protection. But also in this case, there was many critics coming up from the Czech Data Protection Authority, who in first place blamed the ministry to not have involved the Data Protection Authority since the beginning of the development and implementation of the app. It was consulted also for the second release of the app, but in a very general way. And also some blames of the Data Protection Authority, again, also in this case concerning the risk assessment that should have been done, and also on the fact to be more transparent also with the users of the kind of information that on the terms of conditions of the app has not been really followed up. So in general, what we can say from these two experiences, and more generally if we look also at the European level, is that there are some good things and there are some shortcomings as regard the lessons learned. The good side of the coin is that when the European Union manages to develop a clear set of guidelines, states are quite likely to follow them and are quite like to cooperate. The first phase in April There were also when there were more attempts from the European institutions to engage with the national authorities, even though not all national authorities responded in a positive way, but most of the countries responded, so this is a good signal. And but the shortcomings was that European institutions have not been constant in this dialogue. We have, if you look at the documents that have been released on content tracing app, there are mostly of April 2020. After that, there is not that much, and also the websites, which European websites are not very. It's very difficult. Some of the parts of the website are not up to date. It seems that you have the feeling that European institutions have a bit lose. Maybe hope that there will be a coordination among national authorities, but instead they should, I think they should insist on this, and they should push more national authorities to share practice, because if they share practice, they are a bit more forced also to be more transparent on their procedure and to share it, and also to make a real effective use also of the instruments that we already have. For example, according to the GDPR, there is already in place some mechanism of coordination of data protection authority that can coordinate on different issues. So these kind of things should be implemented more. So I think for now we stop here, and but I'm very looking forward to the comments from Kristina and also from our audience. So thank you so much for now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Federica Cristini, who presented her paper on apps and how actually apps are used to track individuals who are identified as positive during COVID-19. Extremely interesting topic. And before giving the floor to Professor Kristina Irion, I would like to invite all of you, our viewers, to join the discussion. Use the platform on our website. You can go to the website of the Institute of International Relations and find the platform where you can ask your questions, of course, leave comments and participate in today's workshop. Extremely interesting topic, and now I would like to give the floor to Kristina, who is our discussant. Good morning once again.
Good morning, Asya. Thank you for having me. Greetings from Amsterdam. It is a very, very rainy day, and I would have rather been with you in Prague today and enjoy this forum online, or in real world, but now it's online, and I think you did a great job to do it this way. It's a very good organization. Dear Federica Cristini, I have to say that I'm very pleased that I'm allowed to comment and discuss your paper. I have been reading it with great interest, and I think the choice of topic is great. Not just because it is of high policy salience to discuss these contact tracing apps. We are back in some sort of semi-lockdown here in the Netherlands. I believe other countries have also stepped up measures. And there has been really a lot of hope placed on technology to assist and to assist with fighting the spread of corona. And a lot of resources and efforts and experts have invested time to build these tracking apps, these corona tracking apps that have been rolled out last year in many countries. And let me go to your paper. What I like is that it takes the format of a policy paper, which is always making it so much more accessible. It is very straightforward, uses clear and inconspicuous language, so that it is really, really a good read. Yeah, given the amount of information you transport, you are hiding it very well by using this accessible language. So this is an absolute pro, because a policy paper is, of course, addressed not to a purely academic audience, but to decision makers, policy makers at national level and also at the level of the EU. And this is also evidenced by the recommendations you are pulling together at the end of your paper. So for this, my compliments, because this is a complicated topic. It is not always easy to stay at such a level where language is not becoming actually overly complicated. I have to say that it was a good choice to also compare the activities of two countries in the field of these corona apps, but you also started your policy paper with setting the scene. And that was an important introduction to show a bit the role of the European Union and the general challenges with these corona tracking apps. One of the biggest challenges is, of course, that it is a tracking COVID-19 app. It is not a tracking individuals app. And that has put the European Union actually quite on the spot, because now it was for the first time necessary to develop systems on technology that are, on the one hand, complying with the high standards on data protection and privacy and e-privacy that are called for in our Charter of Fundamental Rights, but also in the General Data Protection Regulation, and at the same time perform the function that these technologies are designed to do, namely helping the spread or helping to contain the spread of this pandemic. And the European Union has, of course, and also many governments of member states have, of course, seen the quite successful rollout of corona tracking apps in other parts of the world, especially in Asian countries, especially in China, where such concerns are maybe not as high on the policy agenda. In fact, privacy probably didn't factor much when China wanted to combat the spread of the disease. So in a way, Europe had to accomplish two things: living up to its European values, and inscribing these values inside a technology, and still creating something that actually is meaningful to use. And this is why the paper of Federica is so important, because it, on the one hand, keeps on showing how these values matter for the design of good technologies, and on the other hand, how this adoption of these contact tracing apps has probably not fulfilled the expectations of national policymakers, and also in the and also their contribution to reducing actually the spread of the virus is until now not conclusive. There's research, and they say it's not clear if these corona tracing apps have really been making any meaningful difference. So when I see the setup and also in the paper, I actually perceive of two meta questions that are kind of arching out from this paper. And one thing is, of course, the role of the EU, in this field. And the EU has more of a coordinative role. The EU is not having a competence in the field of health. That explains also why a little bit later, only after the first months of corona have already swept through the member states, the EU actually became more facilitating and also more vocal, and especially when it was about defining the standards and criteria for these kind of technologies like contact tracing apps. That was something where the EU could actually fall back on its role, not just as a coordinator, but also on its role to protect data protection of EU citizens, where the EU has exclusive competence, and also in the field of electronic privacy, since this is an app which is charged on a phone. the EU could latch on this one. And we have seen that the EU does not, it is trying to actually coordinate the efforts of the different member states and create interoperability interfaces between these various corona contact tracing apps. And this was a good thing. It always comes too late because nobody has probably been planning for a pandemic. But I also believe that the EU has learned a lot from this experience, and that it kind of helps to enhance the preparedness in a way of the EU for such events to come. Yeah, we are, for example, seeing quite successfully how the EU has managed to establish a regime of mutual recognition and interoperability of these QR codes that are proving that you either, the different Gs, that you either have had corona or that you are vaccinated or that you have been tested. So this interoperability and also mutual recognition of QR codes is something that is really, really critical for inside the EU, so that people can travel and can still continue moving across borders within the EU. And that is one of our fundamental freedoms as well of the EU treaties. So the corona tracing app back there had to, there are two things that are becoming rather contentious. One is the issue of anonymization, and especially the design of the technology. Because the paper does a great job to explain that there are these two different models. One is this decentralized, the preferred one is the decentralized architecture, and the other one is centralized server architecture. But that has also to do with the scope of this paper. Underlying, there has been really quite some how can I say, like a huge discussion in the technical community, also with the involvement of many stakeholders and academics, and especially Michael Veal from London has been very active in this field, but also other academics who were actually trying to convince the developers of such apps in the member states, but also the decision makers that are actually commissioning such app development, that first of all, the decentralized model is the only one that actually can have some privacy by design plugged inside the code. And what has also been making headlines is actually that two of the largest mobile phone operators of mobile phone operating systems, so to speak, Google that operates Chrome and Apple that has iOS operating system, that they were also involved in actually designing a decentralized code that is suitable for this contact tracing and made that available as open source for these app developments that were going on in many other parts of the world, including in the EU. Because there had been a number of developments at member state level that simply got stranded. They were technically not functionable, or they had security holes. It was actually, so to say, not a distinction of these government commissioned developments. But I don't want to say that this has been the case with Italy and Czech. I'm now actually aiming more at the discussion for this British contact tracing app that has been not fit for purpose, and also other contact tracing apps had to be overhauled after the first trials showed that they are not working. Anonymization is a big word that is way too often used, because most of the time anonymization is not what is actually in the game here. Anonymization means that it is absolutely not possible to actually track anything back to an individual. However, if there is comparing between lists, as Federica has so well explained in the beginning, even if these are cryptographic codes that are compared against each other, and they are then communicating back to the device owner, then in fact we cannot speak of a full anonymization. There's always then a link back, otherwise this whole contact tracing wouldn't work. What we can talk about is a cryptographic function that makes it fairly secure and quite unlikely that it can be traced back. That is why the decentralized system has the preference from the centralized system, where it is less difficult to actually link these cryptographic identities or these codes back to the user of the phone. Yeah? So this is something where we have that connects with a really large discussion between pseudonymization and anonymization. Anonymization is hard, and it is especially when the function of any service is to communicate something back to people or match them and compare lists. It is hardly something that can be called anonymization. But it makes this is still a good technology. Yeah, it is still a good technology to use this cryptographic function and make sure that actually there's no central server to be able to have all these codes and be able to translate them back to an individual's identity. The second big, let's say, challenge of these European contact tracing apps are that these apps are voluntary. This is something also here where foreign or other countries didn't bother to do it this way. And in Europe, that was from the very outset a requirement that individuals and citizens shouldn't be forced to install contact tracing apps. Yeah, and this has to do with the fact that this is very privacy invasive, but also invasive for other fundamental rights. And there must be also other ways than contact tracing apps, like digital technology, to be compliant with the corona measures of a given country. And to show that it is possible to create such an infrastructure, but then in the end to realize that there has been very little demand for this infrastructure by the citizens is, of course, at the first glance, it looks like a gross failure of the whole idea. Either make it not voluntary, or just leave it if only so little people have signed up for it. But at the same time, I believe that we also have to see that some of these contact tracing apps have a very limited functionality, and where, for example, they are combined with QR codes, with the ability to actually also function as a proof of vaccination and so on. Such combined functionalities may actually make it much more appetizing for individuals to also download it. But overall, as I said, the success of the contact tracing app measures has not been convincing, statistically speaking. So, at the same time, I would like to come back to these recommendations. And the recommendations of Federica are very salient. They are addressed to the different audiences, like you would expect it from a policy paper. So it is recommendations for EU policymakers, and then recommendations per country surveyed, Italy and also the Czech. And I would like to just pick up that these recommendations are very much about communication, coordination, and taking everybody on board, making it an inclusive development. And this is all something I can agree and I perfectly see how that would be wise and sensible to do. But it is also clear that we actually urgently need more technological expertise in this field. In the field of disease prevention, in the field of privacy protecting technologies, within the data protection authorities, within governments. And we need much, much more of this technical view on these kind of developments. Because that is one of the weaknesses sometimes of using law to prescribe something technical. Yeah, the GDPR has this clause on privacy by design, but giving meaning to it and actually also testing it auditing if it is really delivering privacy by design. For this, we need a different breed of data protection experts, and these are technologists. So one of the biggest things that I'm seeing emerging also from the paper here of Federica is that technology and technological experts and law and public policy makers, they have to really come together and join their expertise, because only then we can make sure that such contact tracing apps are fit for purpose, not privacy invasive, still delivering on their remit to help reducing the spread of the corona virus, and at the same time living up to the values that we have adopted in the European Union, that are setting on the freedom of individuals, on their individual rights, and that states should not engross on the digital devices and using contact tracing as a way of monitoring individuals, because we are not tracking individuals, but we want to track the spread of contacts. Thank you very much. I give back to my colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Kristina Irion, for the comments on Federica's paper. It's. I think that today's discussion is very timely, starting with this, like, or let's say, bringing the questions of, on one hand, public health, safety and protection, and on the other hand, technology, almost 2 years after the pandemic started. So just to tell our viewers, we have around 45 minutes for this discussion. Please use the Slido application on our website, and of course you can join with questions and comments. And I would give the floor to Federica now, because these are also like very some of the questions raised by Kristina were very, very, very interesting. So you might want to respond.
Oh, thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much, Kristina, for the kind words and also for the insightful comments. These are extremely useful, and you really touched the core questions, of course, of the tracking app. Also I agree with everything, and it's also clear that this cooperation from technological experts and the policymakers are needed, and is needed at every level, because it's in the paper I focus more on the cooperation among countries, but it is true also at the very national level, and we have seen it that it is needed that policymakers are in close dialogue with the technicians, not only when it comes to develop the app, but also when it comes to conceptualize the app and to have an effective dialogue on how this app could be at the same time efficient and privacy preserving. It is true, and it's also interesting when also Kristina was mentioning this combined functionality, where the governments, especially also in Italy, it was trying to push a little bit the use of the Immuni app, also adding the function saying, okay, you can also have your COVID certificate with it, like it was a very plus, like a gift that you can download it, and you have also this plus function. But also the communication, I think, at least in Italy, didn't work very well, because there were a little bit more users of the app, but not that much, because also, it was not the only way to achieve the certificate anyway. So, and I think the communicate, and also I think also this also is linked to the communication, something that was not really expressed in the paper, but I think it comes a little bit up on how governments also communicate to the public, to its citizens, what the app is about, and and communicate in an efficient way, because also it is not enough to have the terms of conditions saying your privacy is respected. It is needed to make to engage in effective dialogue and to ensure a little bit of trust also the citizen towards this app. So this is also something that was a bit missing, and this is also linked to the transparency issue that of course government should be a bit more transparent, and also it was also linked especially in Italy to the fact that what was remarked also in the media was the fact it was not very clear how this who was processing actually this data, because according to the law, and actually the server was controlled by the Ministry of Health, but it's also true that this private company developing the app, it's not very clear which role does it have also once the app is implemented, whether it has access to the data, which kind of data, and how it uses. So there are also different actors. When there are multiple actors involved, I think it's also difficult to have a clear understanding of where your data is going and who is going to use it. And also I remember in Italy, and I found also some articles in the Czech Republic of newspapers reporting some dysfunctionality of the app. People saying, I received this message, but then this alert message, and I didn't know what to do. I just go somewhere, and no one could give me a clear answer on it. So there was a bit of confusion of what to do, or what should do. And so there has been reported also many instances of people downloading the app and then simply disinstalling because because for many reasons. So firstly, because well, it is too heavy for my smartphone. So in 1 hour I'm low on battery, so it doesn't make any sense to have an app if I don't have an active mobile smartphone. And this kind of issue, then there has been not really a follow-up. Also, the authorities saying, okay, now we are going to fix it. Now we're going to do something about it. So it's a mix, of problems at different levels, I guess.
I think you probably partially answered the question I have in mind, but I would like to also invite Kristina to join us. Why do you think the popularity of these apps across Europe was so low? Was it because people were, to a certain extent, already concerned about privacy? Because we talk about privacy and how data is used in the recent years very actively, especially when it comes to social media, to different campaigns online. So do you think that part of that, in addition to the mistrust or let's say lack of transparency coming from public institutions, was also that people as individual users were already having their concerns and questions? Maybe Kristina, if you can join us with your thoughts.
I'm of course not a sociologist or digital anthropologist, so I can hardly make now a statement. But so far, what I understood is when a technology is voluntary, obviously, then it's left to the discretionary choice of individuals, and they have to actively do something to download this app. So you lose a lot of the user base already there, because it is an activity. Yeah, when you push it on the devices, like some technology companies are doing something, or they are pre-installing certain software or servers, then it is automatically there. But if you actually build on people to do something, you lose those that are less digitally that have less media literacy, and you lose those that are basically overwhelmed with doing that. So it's not even I think a big concern of privacy, but you also have a fraction of the privacy concerned, those that are anyway with mistrust with the government, and also mistrust with this tracing app, and do not actually buy in the promise that it is designed in a privacy preserving way. And then there is the second element, that even if you have installed this app, then you have also the choice to share whether you are corona positive with this list, so that all the other contacts can be informed. And also here you are losing a lot of people because the ability to do that actively in a moment when people learn they have corona, maybe they have other things on their mind than uploading it on the app. So there you also lose people. So it's not always a principled decision. It has a lot to do with how we are as humans and what we know already from user research in digital technologies, that not doing everything centralized and leaving it to voluntary uptake is not going to yield the same results. And yet, it is something that is part of our structure. And if later we find out, research has to show that as well, that unless you force people to do that, otherwise it is not effective, you may actually want to ask yourself if that is then the road we want to go, then the difference to China isn't anymore very big.
Federica, if you want to add something on this.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think also it's also linked to a general, lack of trust or lack of information that citizens have also on the overall administration of the pandemic by the institutions. For example, in Italy, they perceive it maybe just an additional element that might restrict their freedom, and which is not very clear how it worked. So this adds some elements that obviously do not encourage that much people of using it.
And because the paper touches upon the question of cooperation, and both of you mentioned it a couple of times, there is a question on our website from one of our viewers. What can be done at the EU level to secure data protection during crises such as COVID-19? You mentioned already that we have this local authorities dealing with privacy issues and data protection. Of course, maybe there are differences across countries, but when it comes to the supranational level, the EU level, what else we need in order to, let's say, complete or further develop the framework which is already in place?
Oh, thank you for the question. Yeah, this is a crucial question. As also Kristina already said, one of the problems that the European Union has not the competence on health, and this at the beginning obviously limits the kind of instruments that can be put in place by the European Union. So in this kind of fields, obviously the actions are mainly actions of encouraging cooperation. Of course, as I was mentioning, yeah, just making use, because I'm not really a fan of making additional instruments, creating additional instruments if we already have those some in place. And I think that there are instruments in place that should be used and can be used in a better way. And in a constant way, because what I was also saying, I had the feeling that the European Union at a certain point has just lose interest in doing this kind, in pushing states in sharing their expertise. So what can be done is maybe to also to encourage a kind of exchange also of expertise, not also maybe this also along what also Kristina was saying, to fill in also this gap between policymaker and experts. Actually, there are countries which are a bit more advanced on this, can share also their expertise, can send their expertise also to other countries to learn, and I think this maybe can be a useful tool to overcome also this gap. And this is something that the European Union is also doing in other fields, so maybe it will be useful also to do it also in this kind of field.
Kristina, yes?
I'd like to come in on that because I can not only wholeheartedly support what Federica just mentioned, but there's also a very unfortunate reflex sometimes in times of crisis, like when Corona started, there was this reflex that data privacy, data protection is hindering the combat of the against Corona infections, and a number of countries have also quickly seized the opportunity to say that's national health emergency, and we are going to for a moment we are going to pause data protection requirements because they are making it so much more difficult to effectively respond, and so on and so on. Hungary was one of these countries, but I believe a few more have used the national emergency regulations to overcome during the Corona crisis. But Hungary specifically used it in order to also pause the effects of the GDPR for health-related measures. So this is a reflex, but it is also a type of scapegoating, and it is not true that data privacy, confidentiality, medical confidentiality, and the proper design of technologies that takes privacy by design in their architecture is hindering. It is true that it is difficult, it's harder maybe to first develop solutions, but these are the better solutions. And that is, in fact, what we should aim for. And one of the things where we have to be really careful is that there is not this reflexive blaming data protection for making things not possible. I actually think data protection is exactly what we need when we are going to turn and embrace technology more firmly into the way how we deal with health. But health data is still something that is very precious, where individuals should not be worried that this is up for grab for governments or private companies or insurances. So we want to actually see data protection and privacy laws as an ally. And if we manage this, and I think here the European Commission guidance documents, recommendations, the checklist, but also the all the different opinions from the European Data Protection Board and also data protection authorities, they actually showed full support, but they also said, yes, we do it, but we do it with data protection inside. And this is exactly how we should think about it. And populism populistic politicians are sometimes really too quickly saying on the media, data protection did make that impossible to have some effective corona tracking app or another effective solution. Well, think twice, because this is always an important balancing exercise. And again, data protection does not prohibit or undermine the functionality of corona tracking apps itself. Yeah, that is not the case.
Thank you for bringing the case of Hungary, because I would like to talk a bit about the risks. Both of you mentioned a couple of times that basically this local data protection institutions, but also the framework we have in place, is there in order to prevent us from certain risks and basically our data to be protected. What are what are these risks? Can we maybe specify a bit more? Because, for instance, as Federica mentioned, we cannot maybe imagine how data can be used if it's in the wrong hands, whether this is the government or private actors, because maybe later in the conversation we are also going to point to the role of private companies in this data gathering and the creation of these tracking apps. So what are the specific risks which let's say, we are prevented from through this framework and institutions we have in place?
Thank you so much for the question. Yeah, well, the risks are connected to the type of data that we share. Let's say we share control on, and since we are talking, well, the main risks are also cybersecurity risks. First of all, risk of data breach and of identity theft, for example. Risk connected to the fact that since the app is and the codes are stored on a single mobile device, if this device is under a hack attack, these codes can also go easily flow to another device through a data breach, for example. And since, as we already seen, even though data are anonymized or encrypted, there is always a way to re-identify the user. So there is a risk that that the data are no more anonymous. So it can also be sold, for example. And health data are really precious things in the dark web, for example. So if they go in the wrong hands, it's not a very funny thing to happen. And basically, I see this, and also from and actually, so there are some more concrete risks when these data are gathered at the central level. So with the government having all this data, and it's even though they say, and some, especially also in Italy, the legislation is not very clear, it's quite vague, saying that Ministry of Health can use this data for the purpose for combating the pandemic, which means all or nothing, which could also mean that they could use this data to identify the people and maybe to produce then to adopt special measures in certain regions of the countries, for example, according to the monitoring coming from these phones. And for now, I see this. I think these are the big risks. You know, if Kristina wants to add something.
Kristina, please.
In addition to all of this, I think you mentioned already, Federica, the risk of mission creep, as we call it, that the data that is collected via such apps is used in another context for different purposes. And one of the Orwellian possibilities here is, of course, it is a contact tracing app, so you can actually find out social networks of people in real world, you know, who is seeing whom. And why would that be interesting? That is the same question why governments are spying on political opponents or people that they consider dangerous. And why certain governments have installed, for example, the Pegasus app on the devices of journalists and regime critics and people who are simply they consider dangerous for the state. So this is one type of mission creep. The other type of mission creep is, of course, that the whole app could be repurposed to serve other things, to do actually population-wide control different than for corona prevention measures. But in order to see how people move, to get these motion profiles that can also be interesting for doing research on how the such a virus is expanding in a population. So it can be even useful, but again, if you want people to trust, they should be able to not contribute later to other purposes by having this app. Then we have, of course, the issue with what China and other countries are doing is that they are using the same app also for enforcing and controlling the quarantine, or for controlling that people are observing curfews in their cities. So it is a two-sided sword in a way. Yeah, the app is not just helping you to flag an infection or to compare whether one of your closest contacts had an infection, but it is also used as a measure to reduce the mobility of people and to control it and to enforce it and to attach sanctions to it. And we don't want such a measure here in Europe. And I already mentioned, of course, the risk of surveillance. That is also something that shouldn't be underestimated. Yeah.
Maybe it's time here to say that our next panel is going to focus on political surveillance in the cases of China and Russia. So I think it's great that you actually pointed to political surveillance in relation to how these tracking apps are used in the case of China, but also maybe other countries. It's quite worrying that even within the framework of the EU, we can have cases of governments saying, oh, now we suspend the application of GDPR, and now justifying it with state of emergency, they can basically decide to use these apps for the purposes they want, mainly political surveillance. But this brings me to the conversation we had with Federica just before the workshop about the involvement of private actors as well, right? So these apps actually appear not only as initiative or created by public institutions, but also we have companies, and this is part of the bigger conversation about how tech companies store and use the data they collect, right? So what is the case of, do we have actually private companies which were involved in this, in the creation of tracking apps in relation to COVID?
Thank you so much. Thank you for the question. Yeah, this is a super interesting question, actually. And yes, well, of course, we have private companies collaborating with also public authorities in developing the app, as in the case of Italy. And yeah, with Czech Republic was a bit different because it was not a private company. It was this group of experts who helped the government in developing the app. But we have also interesting cases, especially in Italy, but also in Czech Republic, of private companies developing their own apps and claiming that they're doing it for the public interest of the people, that for helping in monitoring and basically to face the spread of the virus. In Italy, a private company, which was the competitor of the other company helping the public authority, decided to go on its own to develop its own app, which has been also released and can be downloaded and has been used, I think, for some less than 1 million people in Italy, but still some people are using it. And it works like the other contact app, like the Muni app, the official app, with the addition that it can also use based on GPS technology, which means it can also, if the user gives the express consent, can also collect location data. And according to the official website, I could have seen this app claims that if there is this, and it works on a centralized, it adopts a centralized protocol, which means that it's the server of the private company collects the encrypted, the claiming encrypted data from the mobile devices, and it's the idea is that in terms of condition, the private company says, okay, if there happen to be a match with a positive case, you will be contacted. But you should contact and you'll be contacted by a healthcare officer. But I couldn't find any, and there is no official agreement between this company and public authorities. And also what I could find is this, the data protection authority is very aware of this kind of phenomenon, has called on the ministry to say, okay, you should maybe have a look at this, because it's a bit outside the legal framework itself. It's a private company, of course, that cannot act in the name of public interest and developing apps and claiming that is collaborating with the public authorities. And there is a big concern about the data collected, because this is only in control of the private company. And actually also in Czech Republic, this is not an independent app. It was a functionality that was added to an existing app. The MAPI app has an additional functionality. If the user wants, can add the location, can add its location, the factor that has been tested positive, so that other user can see that in a certain part of the city, of the region, there is a concentration of positive cases or not. And also in this case is a centralized approach. So in this case, data are collected by the company. And also in this case, there is no official agreement with public authorities on how to regulate this data. So it's a quite interesting phenomenon, because it's something that is very well known also by public authorities. It is something that is used by citizens, and it's something that remains unregulated in a way. And so on the one hand, we have apps that have been created where laws have been enacted to ensure the privacy requirements. On the other hand, we have a proliferation of something that is out of regulation. And this is something that authorities should also think about a bit more.
Kristina may also want to comment on this. I remember yesterday when we actually touched upon in one of the panels, you took part the role of public and private institutions or actors when it comes to data protection, data usage, and I think that this is kind of fitting into this also conversation. Should we trust, let's say, private actors, which I would say for whom we don't know enough? Federica pointed to this example from Italy, but how, let's say, individual users can possibly know? Should we look at terms and conditions, what we should look for in order to feel that our data is protected?
That is a big question, because trust is really such an ephemeral thing, and it is very hard to really conceptualize trust. You can only do that per relationship and per context. Let's put it that way. So it depends on what we are talking about. I would sometimes trust a private actor more than the government, or the other way around. Yeah. So with these Corona apps, I think Federica really made a good point by saying that the public health measures can be carried out by a private actor. That is not a problem, but then it should be under a strict legislative framework that regulates how this has to be done, and without any business interest on the data, at least from these private actors. So public-private partnerships are crucial and often are very successful, in fact, to bring about new technology and all that. Where that is not something now I'm saying in relation to this Corona tracing app, but sometimes maybe the public sector has to become more sharp about how to generate the conditions that this cooperation between the private sector and the public sector in the end is only carried out in the public interest, and not becomes like starts tipping over to the private interest of an actor. I think also we should say that sometimes that's where the know-how is, yeah, with private actors. That is where you find the necessary expertise and also the computer science and programming expertise. And I recall again that it has been the two big mobile phone operating system providers from the world that sat together and actually developed a code, an open source code, to put a contact tracing app, to implement that into a contact tracing app. So it's not that they are running it, but they actually kind of helped the development a bit off the ground. And it has been them that put a very strong emphasis on the decentralized setup here. And at the same time, there are tasks that belong to the government. And when the government wants to invoke health emergency, and especially also that there is an important public health crisis, yeah, then it should be also the government that is responsible doing it, also responsible vis-a-vis the citizens and responsible for what this technology is doing, yeah. And that is something where private actors can be part somewhere of the value chain of delivering aspects of this technology, but they should never have like control or any say over what happens with the data or any other like windows to do something that actually would create a different purpose or a different means of processing. So that's the definition of a controller. But more I cannot add now here. I think we have learned a lot from these corona tracing apps. We have learned a lot about how to do things better, how to coordinate earlier. We have also quite some successful moments, so and let's not just stand still at the things that were less positive. I think it was a huge success that there has been an interoperability framework within the European Union, that we actually achieved that these corona tracking apps would also work in different countries, that we have been achieving to build something that in many cases is rights and privacy preserving, that we have achieved to avoid that there's discrimination or force of its use. All these things are actually positive, and maybe if that ever is needed again, which we all don't hope, that we are much quicker in falling back on these actually successful templates and to bring about a technology. Yeah.
Thank you. We have a few minutes until the end of this workshop, so I would like to once again remind our viewers, whoever wants to join with a question or a comment, you can use the Slido application on our website, the Institute of International Relations in Prague. There is a question from one of the people in the audience. And I think that partially we responded to this question. He or she says that in France, actually, the apps the app was pretty popular and widely used. Why is this difference with countries like Czech Republic, for instance? And what could be done better by the government or generally by public authorities? Why do we have these differences across European countries?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. Well, I guess it depends. As we already mentioned, it's about the communication. I think France it communicated better how the app was useful for, and there was have been more consistent in this communication efforts, and this is one of the things that as I was saying, this is very crucial for national governments. If they wanted to make it more successful, they should engage more with experts, engage more with communication and transparency issues.
Okay. And Kristina, your take on this?
Yeah, this communication is a good point, but it has also to do with different relationships between citizens and their government, different levels of trust, also in how far you actually can mobilize them to see the value of installing contact tracing app. All of this is playing a role, and the European Union is diverse. Yeah, we are not all the same. This is also our strength, I would say. It's nice to see these differences, and the same way people also perceive differently the value or the disadvantages of such a technology. Also, the media plays a big role. I mean, if mass media, newspapers, television channels, also in the online media sphere, if they are doing a good reporting and they are basically informing the people objectively about the pros and cons of such a COVID contact tracing app, then people will be much more likely to also adopt such a technology. If you are swamped with misinformation and disinformation and fear mongering and all these kind of things, maybe then it makes people rather insecure and unsure whether this is a good thing in the first place. So these are different ways also to see the bigger picture. Of course, this is not happening in isolation, and we have seen that especially the public sphere has been quite vulnerable. Our discussion has been quite vulnerable to information that actually make people rather insecure, and that destroy trust. And then we are back at the trust from the beginning.